And welcome to Bristol Legal, a show dedicated to legal issues that impact everyone in Bristol County and beyond. My name is Elizabeth Nowakowski. I'm the Associate Professor of Paralegal Studies at Bristol Community College. Today I'm very excited to have a guest from Attorney General's Office, Attorney Cynthia Mark from the Attorney General's Office of Massachusetts, who is also the Chief of the Fair Labor Division.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
There is the issue of labor and employment impacts most of our residents. So maybe to get started, if you could talk to us about your division and what it does. Your colleague Steve Marshall was here at our show, and he talked about how the Attorney General's office is structured, how you have the bureaus, various bureaus, and then I assume that the division is within one of the bureaus. And maybe you can tell us more about how it's structured and what you do.
Sure. So the Fair Labor Division is part of the Public Protection Advocacy Bureau, and we are responsible for protecting the wage and hour rights of workers in Massachusetts. So what that includes is making sure that workers are paid in full and on time, that they're paid the minimum wage and overtime, and other related laws like child labor, earned sick time, prevailing wage. There are many, many laws that protect workers, and we're the division that is primarily responsible for that enforcement.
So how do you get involved? So how many do you have attorneys working for you?
Yes.
And I assume other staff. And what do you do? What does the staff do?
So we have a great staff, if I may say so myself. We have a team of 20 investigators and about 10 attorneys. Our investigators and attorneys speak many different languages, and people can access our assistance by going online, filing a complaint, or if they're not ready to file a complaint and they just want to get information, they can always call our hotline.
Okay, and the number, we will display the number. You can probably see it at the bottom of the screen now, and if not, you will see it at the end of the program for sure. So what are the top areas of complaints that you have, I don't know if it's cyclical, but do you see on a regular basis from our residents?
Yeah, so it is, the number of complaints goes up and down a little bit, but in the last few years we get anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 complaints a year, and it really runs the gamut. We get a significant number of non-payment complaints, but also minimum wage, overtime, child labor. The Earned Sick Time law is a relatively new law. It took effect in July of 2015, and so in the first year of that law, especially, we were getting a lot of complaints about employers who were not providing paid earned sick time to their employees.
And that has gotten a little better as the employers got familiar with the law. Have you seen an improvement in that, or?
I think so. Yeah. So, we did a lot of work in the first year of the law to make sure that employers and employees knew about the new law. So we did a lot of community outreach, workshops for employers in particular at the beginning. And so we've found that many employers now have compliant earned sick time policies, and the question is to make sure that every worker has access to it.
Exactly. And that policy doesn't apply to every employer, right? There is a minimum number of employees that the employer has to have?
So it applies to most every employer, but there's a cutoff. So if it's less than 11 employees, employers still have to provide protected earned sick time, but not paid.
Not paid, okay.
And 11 or more, they must pay.
And is it 11 full-time or 11 part-time?
Just 11 employees.
Okay,
yeah. So part-time workers and temporary workers are entitled to earn sick time.
Okay. So they all count as an employee, regardless of what type of employee you are.
Yes.
So one of the issues is the sick times one of the complaints that you're getting is used to be on a sick time. What about the other ones? For example, the unpaid time. What circumstances does that arise in?
So some workers they work and they're just not paid.
It's so hard to believe that.
It's really hard to believe. It's really hard to believe the number of complaints that we get. And, you know, there may be many reasons that employers don't pay. They may be waiting for a payment themselves, and then they say, you know, I'm waiting for a payment, so as soon as I get my payment, I'll pay you.
But that's not good enough.
That's not okay.
Yeah.
So workers have to be paid weekly or biweekly, and they have to be paid in full. I mean, that's part of what an employer must do to be in business.
Yeah. So that's so. What happens if a complaint comes through you about a situation like this, where and I didn't, for whatever the reason, I didn't get paid, right? What do you usually do? What does your office do?
So we can do a number of things. We can do a letter to the employer to say we got a complaint. If you send us a check within, you know, a week and a small penalty, then we'll be done. Just send us the money and we'll get the worker paid. Sometimes if the complaint involves a large number of workers, then we will open an investigation. And, you know, say it's an overtime allegation. One worker might complain about not being paid overtime, but if one worker is not paid, probably many workers are not being paid. So we may open an investigation, ask the employer to provide us with time records and payroll records to make sure that workers have been paid. We may do site visits to visit the employer and talk to workers to make sure that they're being paid for all hours worked. The other thing that we may do is, because even though I have a great team, with 6,000 complaints, we cannot open and investigate every single case. So in many cases, we do issue what's called a private right of action letter. And with a private right of action letter, a worker can go to court on his or her own, or with the help of a lawyer. And if that worker prevails, he or she is entitled to triple damages, attorney's fees, and costs.
And something like this, that's often, if it's an individual employee, it can be done at small claims court, I presume. So,
Yes.
which is much more sort of, if I can say, user-friendly or friendly for clients.
It's a lot faster.
Yeah.
You know, it's a faster process. The filing fees are less, and theoretically, you don't need a lawyer to proceed in small claims court. You don't need a lawyer even in the regular session, but it's a lot more complicated when it, you know, with the rules. So in small claims court, it's a little easier.
Sure.
So something that we're doing to try to make sure that workers take advantage of that private right of action letter is we've been doing wage theft clinics. We've been doing them in Boston for a little bit over a year. And what the clinics do, what we do is we get private attorneys to come to the clinic to give workers free legal consultations. And workers can also get help drafting a demand letter or drafting a small claims complaint, or workers might get full representation from the clinic. So that private right of action letter is meaningful, and you know, we want workers, when we can't assist or investigate, we want workers to be able to get the assistance they need to get their wages.
So we're trying to empower them, and hopefully they can go on their own, and you know, with the help of the clinic. So I know there were a few in Boston. We are working on launching one in this area in Bristol County, and hopefully we'll have one in March. And I assume that this information will be available on your website.
Absolutely.
So if you are looking to find out when the next clinic is, wherever that would be in Massachusetts, just go online and look it up. And I'm sure they can also, the viewers can call your office and find out when the next clinic will be happening.
Absolutely.
Because that's a great opportunity to come in and get quick advice and get some sort of hands-on legal help. So you mentioned the minimum wage, where still some employers disregard. Right now the minimum wage is $11 per hour?
It's $11 per hour. And I just wanted to show you a poster that I brought.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is a poster that Attorney General Maura Healey puts out, and it should be posted in every workplace. So if workers are curious about their rights, this is the most recent version of the poster, and it clearly states what the minimum wage is, $11 per hour. Virtually every employee is entitled to the $11 minimum wage, and there's no, training wage, or some employers will say to workers, you are on a probation period, so we're going to pay you less. The minimum wage is the minimum wage, and all workers should get it.
And so that's another issue that your office can be called about, right? That's, and I'm sure you hear about it all the time, unfortunately.
Yes.
And other one is, we talked about timely payments, so it's similar to not getting paid at all. What about the child labor laws? What do you see in that area in terms of complaints?
So we've actually seen an increase in child labor violations. We get those complaints sometimes from one parent of one child, and sometimes customers will file a complaint with us, and they'll say, I was in a store and I talked to some worker who looked really young, and I asked, how old are you? And so sometimes we get tips just from the general public. Our laws are very protective of children. They assume, rightfully, that children should be in school. Children should primarily be learning and in school, and not primarily working. We understand that children need to work for many reasons, and work can be a very good experience for children, but we just want to keep them safe. So children under 14 are generally not permitted to work. There are exceptions like babysitting, chores around the house, that's okay.
Which are unpaid.
Chores around the house are okay. But, we're talking about, so we see a lot of children working in restaurants, maybe fast food restaurants especially, retail stores, and that's fine too, but employers just need to follow the rules. So for 14 and 15-year-olds during the school year, they can't work more than 18 hours a week, and they can't work more than 3 hours on a school day. For children who are 16 and 17, they can't work more than 48 hours per week. They can't work more than 9 hours a day. That's a lot of hours.
That's a lot of hours for an adult.
That's a lot of hours for an adult. And so it's a lot of hours for children. We have found, and then there are some restrictions on the hours, like what time they can work till. So on school nights in general, children should not be working past 10 o'clock. And it's a little more permissive on a weekend night. But we've taken some pretty serious, we've penalized employers pretty seriously in the last year or two, where we've found numerous, like hundreds of violations by employers.
That's unfortunate. Because you do have a lot of fast food restaurants closing late. So if you see those young adults working, they usually close at 1. Some fast foods, they're open 24 hours, right?
Yes, some are open 24 hours.
So I can see how this becomes an issue. So once again, this is a place, this is a situation where you would call your office and voice a concern.
Yes.
One of the things that is unfortunately in the news these days is the issue of immigration and those who are here undocumented. And as we know that many of those residents, they're still residents of Massachusetts, they they do work,
Yes.
probably illegally. However, they still work and expect to be paid.
Yes.
What is? How does your office? What is how do you handle those situations? Do these employees have rights?
Absolutely, they have rights. So everything that I said previously about being, you have a right to be paid on time, in full, minimum wage, overtime, all of those rights apply to any worker, irrespective of immigration status. If an employer allows you to work and you work, then you must be paid, and you must be paid a legal right. So we actually have on our website an advisory that we put out last May 1st. We call it the May Day Advisory, and it talks about the rights of all workers, regardless of status.
Okay, so that's very helpful. So if you are in a situation where you didn't get paid and you hear you are undocumented, you should still consider calling the Attorney General's office. It's a safe place to call.
Absolutely. I hope that people call us because we really care about workers, and we want to make sure that they work hard for their wages, and to not be paid, that hurts everybody. It encourages illegal behavior by employers, and it hurts workers who are citizen workers as well. And it hurts the good employers who are trying to play by the rules and pay all their workers a legal wage. It hurts those employers.
And along with that goes something that you mentioned earlier, which is you mentioned this, many of your investigators and attorneys speak other languages. I know that on your website you have a lot of information that we are discussing here is available in many languages on your website. And I can vouch for it because I looked at it and I was very impressed how many languages you cover. Asian, obviously Spanish, Portuguese, and I think Arabic is on there. I can list them all. It's quite a number. So one thing I wanted to mention to our viewers is make sure that if you know someone who doesn't speak English and would like to get some of the information that we are discussing here today, they can get that information in their own language.
Absolutely.
And they can, when they call, can they reach someone in their native language? How does that work if they were to call?
So we have hotline numbers for English and Spanish and Portuguese.
Okay.
And if a worker spoke another language besides those three, as long as they were able to say Chinese, if they spoke Chinese, or Vietnamese, or if they speak Vietnamese, we would find someone to speak to them in their language.
Okay. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention, to ask about the regional offices. There are 3 regional offices. I'm not sure about their official names. I know there's one in Springfield, Worcester, and one in New Bedford covering the western, I assume central and southeastern.
That's
Is that
right.
fair to say?
Absolutely.
And how does your office work with those offices? That's redundant, but I know that one of the reasons why the regional offices exist is to bring the Attorney General's office closer to the communities, making sure that there is sort of they feel that they can reach out to the community and can help the residents. So while it may not be as convenient for someone in Boston to walk into one Ashburton place and file a complaint, is that something that someone can do, a resident can do with those regional offices when it comes to some of those issues that we discussed today?
Workers have different options. They can just go online. They don't have to go to an office to file the complaint. Or if they're more comfortable speaking to someone in person, they can go to the New Bedford, Worcester, or Springfield office, or they can come to the Boston office.
They can come to the
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have, so the Fair Labor Division does have staff in the main office in Boston and in all regional offices.
Okay. So that's very helpful.
We try to be very accessible.
What about, I like to mention retaliation, because I think that may be one of the reasons why some employees may be hesitant and reluctant to call your office. You mentioned that there are 5,000 to 6,000 complaints per year, and I wonder how many never even make it.
Yeah.
How many employees are not
Yeah.
even contacting you because they're afraid.
Yeah. It's hard to measure, like, who doesn't contact us, right? But we know that many people don't make it because either they're fearful or they don't know, which is why this program is so excellent that you're letting people know about their rights. But sometimes people are afraid that if they file a complaint, then they'll be fired or their hours will be cut. When people fill out complaints, they can say, you know, please keep my identity private. Like, please don't disclose my identity to the employer.
Okay.
So they can do that. At some point, we may need workers to come forward if there are not on the books violations. But we can talk to the we will respect a worker's wishes to remain anonymous, and it may limit the kind of relief we can get, but we'll respect that.
But then on the other hand, if the employee does come forward and there is retaliation,
Yes.
you will be made aware of it, that retaliation usually.
Absolutely.
And there are consequences to the employer. It's
Yes.
not as if someone gets fired or maybe,
Right.
you know, whatever the situation is. It doesn't mean that, I mean,
Retaliation is illegal.
It's exactly.
It's absolutely illegal to retaliate against a worker for asserting their rights under our wage and hour laws. So if an employee is being paid less than minimum wage and the employee complains to an employer first, even if they don't complain to us, if they complain to the employer and say, hey, I see on the poster that I should be paid $11 an hour and you're paying me $8. And the employer says, well, I don't like that you complained about that, and retaliates in some way, that's illegal. And the employer can be civilly penalized. I haven't talked about criminal enforcement, but we do have civil and criminal enforcement authority in the Fair Labor Division.
Okay. And I can't stress enough, retaliation is illegal, and this should not really stop an employee from filing a complaint, if we can say so, because
Yes.
The Attorney General's office is going to look out for you, if I can say that.
Absolutely,
Is that fair statement?
absolutely. Workers should feel safe in contacting us.
Okay. One of the things that we talked about briefly before the show is sometimes the Attorney General's office generally, and I assume each division on its own, takes actual legal action and files a lawsuit on behalf of an employee or group of employees. It doesn't happen all the time. I mean, you only have 10 attorneys
Yes.
and 6,000 complaints.
That's right.
What usually, what factors come into play when you decide to bring a lawsuit on behalf of a group of employees? Because I assume it's usually group. I mean, I guess it could be egregious enough where it's
Yes.
one employee.
Yeah.
But-
I would say that in most cases that we try, after an investigation, if we've found violations of our laws, in most cases we will try to resolve it with the employer through a settlement agreement. So if an employer acknowledges that there was a mistake, comes into full compliance, and, you know, going forward, hopefully not from this date, but from an earlier date during our investigation, has already fixed some of the problems, then we can come to an agreement where the employer will pay back the workers and a penalty. There may still be civil citations involved that will, you know, will be a record that this employer has violated the law before, but it's a quicker way for us to resolve cases.
Okay. So that's, don't count that the Attorney General's office is going to go on your behalf to court all the time.
No,
but
we don't have to go to court
yeah.
because we can also just issue civil citations without court permission.
Yeah, so usually the cases are resolved without the court, hopefully. let's hope, right?
Yes, yes.
One of the things that I found fascinating, I wasn't aware of it actually, all the databases that you have available to the public, and I strongly encourage viewers to just take a look at them, not even if you don't have an issue right now, just so you are aware what's out there for when you or someone you know may need it.
Yes.
Can you mention some of those databases?
Sure. So the Fair Labor Division, we post 2 types of data on our database, on our website. One are complaints. So any complaint that's been filed since January of 2015 will be on our database. Those are complaints only. So it doesn't mean that we've done an investigation and that we've found the employer to be in violation, but it means that a worker or somebody has filed a complaint against that employer. That information may help an employee decide if they find their own employer on the list. They may say, oh, I'm not the only one. Like someone filed a complaint before, and may encourage a worker to file a complaint. The other type of data that we have on our website are enforcements. So we have a list of all the citations and settlements that have been entered into also since January 2015.
Okay, so that's just good information to if you want to look into employer, and maybe if you're looking for a job, when you're thinking of getting a job with an employer, it may be worth looking it up. It's maybe part of your due diligence.
Yes.
I always say it's a two-way process, right?
Absolutely.
It's you getting interviewed, but also you should know who's hiring you.
I hope workers do that.
Yeah, let's hope.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like our viewers to know or want to share with us? Words of wisdom at the end, just before we close?
So, I would just say that I understand that every worker works in order to make money to support their families. We may I love my job. I hope you love your job
my
too.
Job.
But in the end, if I'm not being paid, I can't afford to do this job because I do it to support myself and my family. And so workers sometimes are put in a hard position when they're faced with a choice of, do I keep working based on promises to be paid, or do I cut my losses and stop working, right? We understand that that's a hard choice for workers to make, but we hope that any worker who feels that their rights are being violated will at least contact us. And hopefully they'll file a complaint, because even if the worst case scenario is if we say, oh, you're not entitled to that right that you thought you were entitled to. That's the worst case scenario. But the best case scenario is that they will get paid what they have earned, what they have rightfully earned. And it could be, it could be $100 or it could be $10,000. But workers work hard for that money, and we really want to help them get what they deserve.
I just want to make sure that our viewers know that this resource is available to them. The Attorney General's office and your division, Fair Labor Division, is there.
Yes.
So if you have any questions, concerns, if you're not sure, just give them a call. Give them a call, and as Cynthia said, you're just going to at least get a peace of mind, whether instead of being not sure.
Yes. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for being here today, and hopefully maybe you can come back in a few months and give us an update on some of the other issues that there are some other things that your office does.
Sounds good, and I hope that when we finalize that date for the wage theft clinic in Southeastern Mass, that you'll publicize that for us.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We're already talking about it. Thank you everyone for watching, and once again, if you have any suggestions for topics and ideas or guests, send me an email, and we'll take it from there. Thank you again.